Guys, so I found something interesting for you guys. This has to do with the Big U case. So this is the brief in support of detention for defendant Eugene Henley Jr. So defendant Big U, also known as Anybody Killer, Hannibal Muhammad, Dave Austin, Draws Unk Big U, Eugene Henley Jr. Alright, so this is the brief prepared by the prosecutors to try to keep Big U in jail, and let's see what they're alleging. Let's see what they're saying. Let's see how many pages it is. All right, it's not too long, so let's get through it. So this is the amount of cases they're referencing. I mean, this is a thorough brief prepared by the prosecutor's office. Let's go through it. He was not granted bail, but this also gives us an insight into what case they're bringing against Big U. So let's start. For decades, defendant Eugene Henley Jr., also known as Big U, has put on a public facade masquerading as a reformed gang member and legitimate businessman whose only ambition was to better his community. But defendant wasn't helping Crenshaw. He was helping himself. In the shadows, defendant was secretly operating as a kingpin of a criminal enterprise that has ruled Los Angeles through violence, fear, and intimidation. Now he seeks pre-trial release under the guise of his reformed persona, even though his criminal activities have included murder, extortion, robbery, wire fraud, bank fraud, and human trafficking. The court should see through defendant's farce and keep him in custody for the safety of the community. To avoid custody, defendant will no doubt continue his double dealing as he did to celebrities and donors that he duped into believing they were helping young, underprivileged athletes chase their dreams, when in reality they were unwittingly lining defendant's pockets as he embezzled donation after donation. Even in his short time in custody, he's up to his old tricks, once again trying to use some of those same celebrities for his personal gain. He has even suggested that he can manipulate the President of the United States into intervening in the case and dropping the charges, even as he is simultaneously derisively refers to the President as the Orange Man while in custody. This court should not be fooled by the good deeds defendant promises to accomplish if only he could close the detention doors behind him. The truth is that he will undoubtedly cause exponential harm to the case, to the community, and to others if he were released. Defendant should remain detained for the safety of the community, the victims, and witnesses in this case. In defendant's own words, if I would have had a problem with any man, the issue would have been resolved and he wouldn't be here or I wouldn't be here. And for the hope of some semblance of justice for the families of his victims. Indeed, with seemingly just hours of notice of his impending arrest, defendant has already destroyed valuable evidence, attempted to paint a false narrative of his criminality in the public, and publicly condemned his enemies by name. This publicly condemned his enemies by name. Well, we know what that is. That's him referring to WACK 100 and Big U and calling them snitches. He cannot be allowed to continue on his obstructive path. Any supporters defendant may offer as sureties will not protect the community. They did not save R.W., whom defendant murdered and abandoned in the desert. They did not save defendant's countless extortion and embezzlement victims, whom defendant terrorized or tricked for years. They did not stop defendant from leaving Los Angeles in the midnight hours before his arrest or hurling thinly veiled threats in the lead up to his surrender. This court should have no trouble finding that defendant represents a danger and a risk of non-appearance, non-compliance with court orders that cannot be adequately mitigated through release conditions. With the utmost respect to pretrial services, pretrial supervision is not enough. For the sake of the community, defendant should remain in custody. Alright, so this is the statement of facts. They're going to present the main issues of the case. Defendant is a dedicated Rolling 60 leader of his own violent racketeering enterprise. Defendant is an avowed and famed member of the Rolling 60s neighborhood Crips street gang. As early as 1992, the Los Angeles Times described defendant as the leader of that gang, and little has changed as defendant has aged. As he states in many interviews, when asked about any gang tattoos, it ain't on you, it's in you. Indeed, defendant's gang ties run deep in his blood. Defendant has loudly, man, so they're watching all his interviews and they're quoting him. Oh my god. For all you people, man, they're gonna quote you in your bond hearings. All you thugs, all you gangsters over there, they're gonna quote you in your bond hearings. Even if they can't use it against you in court, they're gonna quote it in the bond hearings because the rules of evidence are much more lax. Alright. So defendant has loudly recounted the terror he instilled for years. In various interviews, defendant recounts selling narcotics, taking a percentage of all illegal activity in the neighborhood, leading the body snatchers, kidnapping crew, and eventually going to prison where he immediately claims to have paid off the guards and taken a percentage of drug sales. Now, after an investigation spanning more than 4 years, defendant was charged with running the Big U enterprise from at least 2010 until his arrest, which often used the Rolling 60s as muscle in his criminal activities. Bro, they have been investigating Big U for 4 years. This is before Loose Cannon. This is before all the no jumper shit. They have been looking at this guy for 4 years, man, since 2020. Man. 2020, 2021. Specifically, defendant often assisted by Rolling 60s or other members and associates of the Big U enterprise, used intimidation, fear, violence, threats of violence, assaults, extortion, and murder in the streets for power and profit. Through the media and his non-profit Developing Options, defendant portrayed himself as the neighborhood savior in drawing in donations and government resources intended to benefit at-risk youth, but which he oftentimes used to fund his lifestyle instead. Despite his life of crime, defendant never wanted to return to jail, so he went to great lengths to avoid law enforcement detection, tamper with witnesses, and otherwise obstruct justice. Recent examples of defendant's acts or threats of violence. Alright, let's get into it. Murder of R.W. This is that murder in the desert he's being charged with. In 2021, defendant drove to Las Vegas with another enterprise member to confront R.W., a rapper signed to defendant's record label who was also a close friend of defendant's son and someone defendant had known for years. Apparently upset about R.W.'s lack of studio production and purported diss song, defendant left the studio with R.W. in the middle of the night for R.W.'s Airbnb. R.W. leaving his Airbnb with his belongings was the last time he was seen alive, and he was found the next morning with gunshot wounds to the head. Defendant returned to the studio hours after he had left, claiming he had gone to the gym despite a 2 a.m. hour. Defendant's cell phone activity, the obstructionist conduct of other members of the enterprise, and defendant's own words and reactions intercepted on the wire prove his guilt of the heinous crime. Oh my god. Alright, guys. So, I'm guessing the obstructionist conduct is when they went in and they tried to clear out the studio, take all evidence, and then defendant's own words and reactions. So he's on the wire. We're gonna see what the hell he said. R.W.'s murder not only demands defendant's continued detention, but cautions against what may happen to other witnesses, cooperators, and victims were defendant to be released on bond. Robbery and extortion. Throughout the period of interception and before, defendant was captured on audio and video recordings extorting victim 1. Both, okay, so there's a victim 1. There's a victim 1. This person might be a witness. Both through a co-defendant, Sylvester Robinson, that's his homeboy, and personally. In doing so, defendant Robinson frequently threatened violence against victim 1 if he failed to pay their fees. Those threats were not empty. When victim 1 started to ignore defendant's calls demanding extortion payments, defendant sent multiple armed robbers to victim 1's dispensary to rob him and then demand $10,000 from victim 1 to prevent future robberies. In multiple intercepted calls, defendant and his co-conspirators discussed even more robberies they were committing. Man, they probably have so much evidence. If they've had a wiretap for this long, they probably have a lot. Robinson also frequently told victim 1 about defendant's violence, including that defendant was the only OG still actively committing murders. Man, do you guys hear this? That's crazy. So Robinson, who I'm guessing is, oh wow, that's so Robinson, Big U's homeboy, told victim one, the dispensary owner, that Big U is the only OG still committing robbery. So it's his homeboy who said that shit. In addition to the constant extortion of victim one, defendant extorted victim two for $30,000 for a party thrown in defendant's honor in December 2021. When the victim requested to pay only $20,000, defendant responded with force threatening, "I'll tear that bitch up. Won't be a club there no more," and then sending Robinson, another co-defendant, Mark Martin, and members of the Rolling 60s to confront victim two at his business and extort $30,000 from him. While the substantive extortion counts are currently limited to just some of those extortions of victim 1 and victim 2, they are not defendants only extortions. For example, on October 19, 2021, defendant told victim 1 that defendant was taking over the extortion of another business owner. Then on November 7, 2022, on an intercepted call after yet another extortion victim stated that defendant had not fully paid the extortion victim for work on defendant's vehicle, defendant directed Martin to call the extortion victim right now and stated that he would go out there and kill that N-word. I mean, damn. On February 14, 2023, on another intercepted call, Robinson told defendant that Robinson told Jewboy that he owed the Big U Enterprise money, that they would allow a payment plan, but if he did not pay, they were going to shut this motherfucker down. Okay, so Big U was extorting someone he called Jewboy. Power to direct violence. Making him that much more dangerous, defendant holds power over others threatening and committing violence. For example, on November 23rd, 2022, on an intercepted call, defendant said that he can pay 3 people $50 each to beat someone up and described paying people to mess up a store that was refusing to provide defendant a discount. On April 17, 2023, on another intercepted call, defendant directed an individual to deliver a message to another marijuana dispensary owner that defendant said fuck him and that he fucked with the wrong guy. Alright, so Big U was literally, from these allegations, if these are all on wiretap, Big U was basically running the Rolling 60s mafia-style extortion in the modern day. And, I mean, damn. Despite a prior 23-year sentence for armed robbery, defendant stayed armed. Damn, bro. He received a 23-year prison sentence before. All right, let's read this. Since at least July 20, 1992, defendant has been prohibited from even possessing firearms based on his felony convictions for second-degree robbery with a firearm, conspiracy, and drug trafficking, for which he received a 23-year prison sentence. Upon his release from prison, he nevertheless continued to use firearms himself, like when he murdered RW, and directed others to use firearms, like when they robbed victim one's dispensary. Throughout this investigation, recordings corroborated that defendant consistently was armed. On October 22, 2022, Robinson told victim 1 that defendant and Robinson would be attending an after-party at a club that victim 1 was promoting, and that a pat-down is out because defendant would be in attendance, implying that defendant was armed. Ooh. So he told victim 1, the same dude who owns a dispensary, yo, we're coming to the club, no pat-down, because they got it on them. On an intercepted call a month later, defendant told an incarcerated individual that anyone coming at him better come correct because defendant always has 2 blowers on him. Oh, shit. He's saying that he carries 2 guns on him at all time. On January 3rd, 2023, on an intercepted call, a defendant described to an incarcerated individual tooling up with firearms to travel to a Crips neighborhood because we are the most arrogant, bougie, self-righteous motherfuckers on planet Earth. 60s. On April 1st, 2023, on another intercepted call, defendant asked someone to grab defendant's blower. What the fuck? Which he left on the ground in a blue sweatshirt in front of a tire. God damn, bro. They've been listening to this guy for a long time. The defendant is not only a physical danger, but a financial danger too. Defendant's crimes against victims are not confined only to violence. He spent decades creating a facade of a reformed gang member who seeks to build rather than destroy his community. So disguised, defendant used that persona primarily to take from the very community he claims to help. Hundreds of thousands of dollars flowed from charitable donors and government programs to defendant's Developing Options bank account. Almost immediately, he siphoned off much of the money into his personal bank account. Defendant got richer and richer off his fraud, like his extortions and robberies, owning multiple homes, driving a Mercedes, taking lavish trips, and shopping for luxuries like a $30,000 necklace. The money taken from donors and taxpayers' pockets will never find their intended benefactors, the at-risk youth and children of Crenshaw. That damage cannot be undone, but defendant's success in deceiving politicians, celebrities, and community activists, as well as the public at large, further militates against his release back into the community as he attempts to fund an expensive defense. Oh, here we go. Indeed, the FBI has received information that defendant is demanding $100,000 to $200,000 from celebrities to fund his legal defense. In case that does not work, he also concocted an elaborate plan over jail calls to use politically connected associates, including identified victims in this case, whom he has already defrauded, to advocate for the president's, whom he disrespectfully calls the Orange Man, behind his back, intervention on his case. My God, bro. Woo, he's got a big case. Defendant is fluent in obstruction. All of it may be found on crimes, but defendant built a charmed life following his 23-year sentence for armed robbery. He does not want to give it up and uses obstruction frequently to avoid that. The destruction of surveillance footage, use of encrypted applications like FaceTime, demands to meet in person to avoid law enforcement intercepting communications, use of multiple phones and cars, orders not to speak to law enforcement, and chastising of any perceived or suspected cooperators are detailed in the charging instruments. A few are also highlighted here. Even when the criminal charges were not against defendant personally, defendant instructed a victim's relative that the victim was to go to the lineup, tell him to pick the wrong person, to insulate defendant's associates from the charges. A master manipulator, defendant told another associate that to influence the media for his lawsuit against law enforcement, he should show both positive and negative parts of his life, wear glasses, and say that he was working with developing options even though he was not. On multiple intercepted calls, defendant talked about beating up or at least breaking a witness's jaw, and while defendant may claim other reasons for feuding with that witness, this court should protect him. After fleeing with his phones in the hours before his scheduled arrest in this case in an attempt to intimidate and dissuade anyone from cooperating with law enforcement or otherwise reporting information about defendant posted publicly on Instagram naming his co-defendants and known opponents, instructing the public not to associate with them, and claiming if they did, they were not black. Oh my God. In an attempt to poison the jury pool, defendant posted on Instagram claiming racial profiling, ignoring that almost every single one of defendant's victims, from RW to many of his extortion, robbery, fraud victims, and the at-risk youth he was supposed to help, are black, and blaming his co-defendants and opponents for the charges filed against him in a federal criminal complaint. Okay, so now it goes into the legal arguments. I'm going to do a quick, because I don't think you guys are interested in this. I'm going to do a quick look and then see. A defendant must be detained pending trial where no condition or combination of conditions will reasonably assure the appearance of that person as required and the safety of any other person in the community. Alright. Because he's at risk of non-appearance, nature and circumstances. The nature of serving defendant unequivocally weigh in favor of detention. There's no crime more serious or permanent than murder than defendant committed. Still, defendant still did not stop there. Okay. So this is all going to be legal arguments. The weight of the evidence. The history and the characteristics of defendant. More legal arguments. Alright. Yeah, it's just going to be a lot of very, very, very legal arguments here. Okay, here we go. The conclusion. If the court wants to know how defendant will conduct himself on pretrial release, it need look no further than the recordings documenting defendant's conduct and threats throughout this investigation. With everything to lose, including the immense goodwill he fraudulently procured from the community and his city, the defendant still told anyone who dared to ask that he was a killer. And he proved that he was, because the defendant is both a danger to the community and a risk of non-appearance should the case not go his way. This court should permanently detain defendant pending trial. Okay. Wow. Alright, so there you have it, man. That is a pretty detailed breakdown of what they have, or what they're bringing against Eugene Henley Jr., Big U. Man, that was April 22nd in the courtroom of the Honorable A. Joel Richland, which I guess this might be a magistrate court. Alright, so there you have it, guys. What do you guys think? Big case against Big U. I mean, this guy's not going to win this case. I don't think so. He can fight, though. He can fight. You never know. You never know. He seems to have a lot of support, continued support in the community. But, man, he's basically like a mafia figure, you know? Rolling 60s boss. Used whatever influence he had to extort. And he's been on the wiretap basically for 4 years, guys. 4 years of wiretap, a gangster. So you could imagine how much he said. His homeboys said, apparently his homeboy Robinson is the one that said Big U's the only OG still killing people. So, man, I don't know what these guys are thinking, man. I don't know what these guys are thinking. But, you know, there's a lot of embezzlement. It's hard to see where else he got his money from. You know, I guess that's how he ran his show. We'll see what happens. But, yeah, guys, let me know what you think. New video. Boop.